Hello and welcome to this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio today, second go around. You're starting the year off for everybody.
Yeah, this is
leading
great.
off the year for the delegation.
Yeah, no pressure.
State Representative Mark Sylvia from Fairhaven is joining us today. Lots going on.
Yeah.
The Christmas holidays are over. It's year 2 of the 2-year cycle. My first question is, how'd the first year go for you?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that it's been
flew
a year.
by, I imagine.
It does feel that way. But I actually I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish, both as a representative for the district that I represent, the 10th Bristol, which for your viewers is Fairhaven, Mattapoisett, Marion, Rochester, a bit of Acushnet, and 2.5 precincts in the north end of New Bedford in Ward 1. So, both in terms of what I've been able to do working with my local communities and other members of the delegation to support our cities and towns, but also some of the legislation that's been passed this past session. There's a lot of work that's gone on and still a ton of work to be done. But I've really enjoyed it. I feel as though being out in the community as much as I can be, whether it's through office hours every month in each part of my district, or pushing to see the 13 bills that I filed this session through. 3 have been signed into law, which I'm very proud of. Everything from helping to secure funding for local projects, or kind of helping either constituents or the cities and towns navigate the state system. So whether it's unemployment insurance claim challenges that constituents have had, or helping to address issues with state regulatory agencies for local businesses, or convening and collaborating with communities and MassDOT or other state agencies. There's been a lot that we've been able to do. I think it's important to view the job through multiple lenses. It's not just legislating. That's a big part.
Right.
It's also focusing on, constituent services.
I was going to say constituent service is a huge part of the
Yeah.
job, which people may not understand, but it is your bread and butter because that's
Yes.
what helps you locally.
Yeah.
Do you feel you have you had an advantage because you have served in municipal government. We talked about that the last time you were on. So do you feel you had an advantage jumping in when you first were elected, that you knew some of the process? And now for your second year, it's I don't want to say easier, but you kind of know where to go and what to do?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. When I ran, part of the reason why I ran is because I felt I could hit the ground running on day one, and that's because of having that municipal background, but also working in state government for 6 years in the Patrick administration. So that all helped enormously. But again, when you first step into a new role,
Right.
there are things you need to learn.
Right.
And so for me, I don't know that the learning curve was as high as it might be for someone else who had no government experience at the local or state level. But I think the part that I've become much more familiar with now and made sure I rolled up my sleeves on was the process of legislating, the process of engaging with and meeting and forming relationships with your colleagues. Those are 2 things
Right.
that, I knew some members of the House and the Senate before I got there, but it's 160 members and you all need to work together in one way, shape, or form. And then just navigating, you're a freshman, so you get your committee assignments and just getting familiar with how that committee process works, the new joint rules.
Well, there's inside politics too. You're trying to, again, and you kind of alluded to it, you're working with your colleagues, but you understand that, with your district, there are similar people, similar representatives in other parts of the state that have the same issues.
Yes.
So you need to get, as you said, it's about relationships and, all right, listen, can we help each other on this bill?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I do think you're going to be more effective the more relationships you build, because to your point, depending on what the issue is, you're going to have to build a coalition of other legislators to get something through committee and onto the floor or appeal to leadership. So it's really important that you build those relationships because, again, you're one of 160.
Right.
So it's important to develop that. And I am grateful for being part of the delegation that I am. We work really closely together, all 5 members of the House, as well, that represent the city of New Bedford, Senator Montigny, and then I also share the town of Rochester with Senator Rodericks from Westport. So, and again, it's not just the House, it's the House and the Senate.
Right.
Because any bill that has to, get signed by the governor has to go through both chambers.
Well, and there's interesting thing too is you're vying for, let's face it, a lot of people, a lot of reps that I've talked to in the past. I mean, you've got the Boston, which sucks a lot of energy, and you as a delegation in Southeastern Mass or Greater New Bedford and the Fall River delegation, the Springfield delegation, you're working on similar issues. Because I know, yes, you represent a small portion of New Bedford, but you're voting for New Bedford.
100%.
So you're vying for dollars that Boston is certainly vying for as well.
Right.
And that's hard.
It is. It is. But, again, as we talked about, building those relationships then gives you credibility as well. And when you're pitching to, Ways and Means or another committee, something that's really important to your district, to have the strength of other members there standing with you is always important.
One of the big issues right now, and I think this time of year, and you talked about it the last show, I know, energy.
Yes.
I know people are opening up their bills. It's been a cold winter so far, and we're going to go through a very cold snap next week when temperatures aren't going to be above 20. Energy bills.
Yes.
Huge. I know that I had read that the House is meeting this week, I guess informally, talking about the issue. The governor has talked about trying to do something. Explain to people, first of all, how the energy costs work, because I don't think people understand that. They look at the bill and they say, well, the gas was only $500.
Yeah.
But my bill's $1,000.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're right. I think the single most important issue outside of the budget, which obviously is something that's important because that funds what we do in the Commonwealth, energy costs are probably one of the biggest issues that we need to address this session. Consumers or ratepayers or customers, which were all of those things, last year really started to see a huge impact on their bills, January, February, March. The governor responded with reducing the energy efficiency program budget and providing a very small credit, but a credit nonetheless to consumers on their bills. But that was a short-term fix for something that we need to be very focused on, because you're right, gas and electric customers, there are three parts to your bill. There's the supply piece, which is the actual electricity or gas that's purchased. Then there's what's called infrastructure, which is pipes and wires, and then there's the public policy piece. So there's really three parts to your utility bill. And each one is impacted by different economic factors. So supply is purchased just like we go and purchase goods, and then that price is passed on to the consumer. The infrastructure, it's, when you see the utilities building pipes or repairing wires, they then pass those costs on to ratepayers. So we as ratepayers pay that cost as well. And then there's the public policy piece. So that's like energy efficiency and solar. All of that combined, then you're charged based on how much you use. And when it's a really cold winter, we're all using more to the extent that we can afford to.
And you were talking, I didn't need to interrupt you, you were talking last time too, because you were here in the summer. It was hotter.
Yes.
So the energy costs were up and people using air conditioning to cool off.
That's right.
It's becoming more of a, not just winter issue, it's becoming more of a year-round issue.
100%, 12 months out of the year, depending on the weather and depending on what you're using. And it's become unaffordable for most people. I mean, we hear those concerns expressed pretty regularly. And so over the course of last year, as an individual representative and someone who worked in the energy space.
I was going to say, this is a passion for you.
Yeah, 6 years in the government and then 10 years in the private sector, all related to energy. Really started to roll up my sleeves to see how I could help drive those costs down and focus on the type of policy changes and legislation that really will bring relief to people, because people are hurting with everything else that's happening, with all of the other costs having gone up for folks. So whether it's healthcare, whether it's rent, whether it's groceries, whether it's gas, no matter what, this is just layered on top of that. And we should never be in a place where people have to make a decision between buying less at the grocery store so they can pay their utility bill. Like, that should never be where we are. And so we as a legislature can be an important part of addressing that. Some of it's regulatory, and as legislators we can vote to change those regulations. Some of it is restructuring how things are done and making things such that the utilities are more accountable, or ratepayers pay less of what those obligations have been in the past. So, early on this past year, I reached out and spoke to the Department of Public Utilities, which regulates, they set the rates.
Right, there's a commission.
Yep. We met with the Attorney General's office. They have a ratepayer advocate their job is to fight for the ratepayer. I met with the Department of Energy Resources and with Eversource to really try to understand from their perspective what they identified as the best ways to address this issue, because they're all part of it, right?
Yeah.
They all have to play a role. And then the Energy Committee in the House started the process of putting an energy affordability bill together. The governor filed an energy affordability bill this past fall, and there are key provisions in both the governor's legislation and the House legislation that I think are going to be critically important, and that I think we need to pass to help bring down costs for ratepayers. The House released their their energy legislation in November, but there was a lot of pushback. There was concern from clean energy and environmental groups about some of the provisions related to the Commonwealth's clean energy goals. And so leadership decided they would continue to work on it, bring in stakeholders, and try to craft a bill that primarily focuses on energy affordability, but also continues to provide opportunities for us to grow the local economy from an energy perspective. And so as a result of that, this week, we've been meeting with, by division, so each, there's 4 divisions in the House, 40 people in each one, and each one of those divisions is meeting with the chair of Ways and Means and the chair of the Energy Committee to hear their perspective on the energy bill and to provide feedback, which I think is really important. So I was in one of those division meetings. I've also since put together a list of what I think are the right changes that should be incorporated in this legislation to really help drive cost reduction for ratepayers and continue to drive a energy system that provides reliability and creates economic opportunity for all of us.
How does wind energy play a part in this? I know that obviously with the federal government sort of stopping wind energy projects, I know Vineyard Wind has filed a suit, and they had been up and running. So I'm just kind of curious, the goal I know for years has been to get wind energy up because it'll help lower costs. Is that still viable? Or is that something that you have to, right now because of where it is in Washington, you can't look to that? You still have to figure something out besides that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. In the energy bill that's been proposed, there is a provision that kind of expands out the time frame for more offshore wind and for long-term contracts related to offshore wind, and squarely places the authority to negotiate those contracts with the Department of Energy Resources. So there is an acknowledgement that given where things are with the federal government and the litigation that's happening with the other projects that are kind of behind Vineyard Wind, that we need to extend out that time frame. There's still a real commitment. Massachusetts does need to secure more generation as demand increases. We need to ensure that we have reliability on the system, and the goal is to get the cheapest possible electricity. And so there is a long-term commitment that the administration has made to offshore wind, and so this legislation will help kind of reflect what the current circumstances are with the federal government. And it's interesting because this past week there was an additional 1 gigawatt of hydro that was added to the grid from Canada that's coming into the system. And whether it's hydropower or wind, at the end of the day, the fuel costs
Right, go down.
are ultimately zero, right? Water and wind versus the volatility of other fuel sources like natural gas, which goes up and goes down depending on availability and depending
Supply
on
demand.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So the energy bill needs to be focused primarily on affordability. That needs to be the priority of that bill. That's something every member's communicated to leadership, and leadership agrees. I think the speaker even said in the beginning of our session that energy affordability is something that the legislature needs to address this year. We really do need to I mean, just to give you an example, even in my first year, there was an energy forum in Ward 1 at the Pulaski School. Eversource was there to answer, well, they had intended to answer questions. They gave a presentation, but at the end of the presentation decided to not take any questions from the audience. And so members of the legislature, myself, Representative Hendricks, and Representative Willett, agreed to sit and talk to the constituents that were there that were frustrated about energy costs, and rightfully so. And it was clear then, as it is now, that that's still something that really impacts people's daily lives, and it has to be something that we take up and provide relief to our ratepayers. The way I view it, Jim, is there's short-term approach that we need to take, short-term relief, and then we have to look kind of at the bigger picture and the overall structure of our utility system, because at the end of the day, it needs to be affordable.
Long term.
Yes.
The other big issue that's coming up too, that is going to have to be dealt with in the budget, but immediately in a sense too, is that healthcare, and that the Affordable Care Act, obviously in Washington, they're not extending the benefits. And now there's a lot of onus now on the states if they want to help those that now are not going to have health insurance. The thing that baffles me too, and just based on my experience as well with healthcare, is that people are still going to go to hospitals and places to get care, and those places are going to want to get paid, and they're going to go to the government for it anyway. I know a long time, the state used to have the uncompensated care pool. I know it's called something different now, but that's what it was called then. So the state was providing money anyway for people, because if you walk into an urgent care or nurse emergency room, you're going to have to get treated. It's a big picture thing, I know, but it's something I would assume that has to be looked at in this year's budget. Yeah.
So we're anticipating the governor's House 2 budget proposal shortly. She'll lay out her priorities for the next fiscal year on myriad of issues, including on healthcare costs. At the same time, Senate and House Ways and Means chairs are looking at and anticipating what's going to happen in 2020, fiscal year 27, with cuts to Medicaid and other adjustments that are made by the federal government that may cut the amount of revenue that's typically provided to the states for healthcare support. And so certainly that'll be a big part of the budget discussion that we have. The chairs and the governor have agreed to consensus revenue, which is this is what we think we're going to take in and build their budgets based on that. But there is that piece, which is the impact of federal cuts to states, particularly in healthcare, that is something that we're going to have to address through the budget process. That's one piece. The last year, the legislature did pass legislation that would provide $250 million to community hospitals in anticipation of what you talked about, which is people that do not have healthcare coverage going to the hospital for their healthcare coverage, and the state providing compensation to those community hospitals. So we certainly recognize that that's already starting to happen and will happen more as there are more cuts from the federal government.
And that's not sustainable long term. It's not sustainable for the state, and it's not sustainable for the hospitals.
That's right. And then there are other issues. I mean, there are a number of bills that have been filed this session on issues related to healthcare. There's another issue. There's a reduction in the number of primary care physicians in the Commonwealth, which is increasing people's wait times in order to be seen by a primary care physician. So I do think that there is legislation that has been filed to try to address those issues as well. So healthcare will continue to be, it has been and will continue to be, and it seems like every session, healthcare is a major issue that needs to be addressed. And
the dynamics change, though, the needs with the healthcare.
They do.
I mean, who would have thought that 10 years ago that you wouldn't have enough physicians?
Right.
We don't.
Right.
But there's no money in it.
Right, exactly. Right, and doctors that are graduating from medical school, to your point, aren't deciding to go into primary care.
No, because you can be a specialist
Yep.
and make more money and have less of the administrative costs.
Yep.
And that's the thing. And yet most of them that I've talked to, because I have a couple in the family that have gone to medical school, they would love to be a primary care physician, to know people, get to know their families and what have you. But there's no money in it.
Right.
Which is scary.
Yeah, and healthcare systems are doing what they can, whether it's hiring more nurse practitioners or physician's assistants to supplement the work of primary care physicians. But I do think that is an issue, certainly that I identified during my campaign and that I've heard from constituents and that we see, the numbers don't lie, that there's a lack of primary care in Massachusetts, and we have to do something to try and encourage more primary care physicians to come to Massachusetts or stay in Massachusetts and provide that care to our residents.
One of the things you were talking about off camera, and I think it's good to talk about, is the environmental bills. You said there's going to be a push for environmental legislation in the next 6 months, really, when you think about it. Talk a little bit about that and the impact here in southeastern Massachusetts.
Sure. There is an environmental bond bill. The governor filed an environmental bond bill this session. I sit on the Joint Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. We had a hearing on the environmental bond bill. It's now in the bonding committee. So there will be an environmental bond bill this session. Bond bills are typically, they don't happen every session, but when they do happen, it enables the Commonwealth to bond to provide funding for critical environmental projects.
Right, they're not part of the budget, they're long-term projects.
Right, and that includes providing funding for state programs that drive dollars down to cities and towns. So everything from water and wastewater infrastructure, which of course for us in the greater New Bedford area, we've got a number of wastewater treatment facilities that are either in need of upgrades or are going to be upgraded, and the price tag is significant.
Oh, they're astronomical.
Yes.
And you're always looking for federal dollars, but are they going to be there?
Right. But there are also, and as a result, communities have to make decisions on how much they can do at any one given time because the impact that it has on the taxpayer and the ratepayer. And so the environmental bond bill has a number of priorities categorized by the different state environmental agencies. And so for our district and for our area, funding related to our coastal waters or our water and wastewater infrastructure or the state park system that we have here down on the South Coast or land related matters or fish and game. All of those are under the auspices of the environmental bond bill. And so my hope is that I will be able to secure bond authorization for a number of different priority projects in my district. Each member of the legislature through that bonding process can identify local projects that they could have added to the bill that would provide bonding in the future for those projects. It's never a guarantee, but it's important that if you have those projects on the list at a time when the Commonwealth determines they're going to borrow funding for that priority, that your projects are on that list. And so I've been working with the 6 communities that I represent to identify potential projects, everything from culverts to wastewater substation upgrades to water quality at ponds. And so that is a big bill that will also be going through the legislature. We will be voting on that this year. And I think there's a lot that we can do as members of the local delegation to identify projects for bond authorization for the future.
We've got like 3 minutes left, but it's interesting too, you were mentioning, there's so many projects going on in your district itself.
Yes.
I mean, you go through Fairhaven or even Acushnet, there's so many little projects, and I know in some ways the state's tied to them as well.
Yes.
So there is a lot happening that maybe people don't realize that the state is providing, the legislature has helped get this project, whatever it is, underway.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad that you pointed that out. People see it, certainly. People, whether it's the Route 18 project.
Which is an easy one to see.
Yeah, everyone sees that, and I think our job is to help make sure we get as much information out there about when there are detours, what the project timeline is. That's really important. But that is a massive public works project that, once completed, will have a significant positive impact on the area. Unfortunately for all of us, it's going to require some patience.
Right.
But also Slocum Street in Acushnet is a very good example. It's a major connector road between New Bedford and Acushnet. They've done some major infrastructure work there to bring that street up and also do some aesthetic improvements with sidewalks and curbs. And I'm proud to say myself, along with my colleague, Rep. Steve Ouellette, were able to secure $1 million that had been committed but not provided to the city for that project, so that provided to the town of Acushnet, that the town doesn't have to now use their own dollars for. It's $1 million of committed funding from MassDOT, which is great.
And I've noticed Mattapoisett and Fairhaven too have projects that, and I'm assuming, but I know how it works, that there are some of it is state related.
Yes, I mean anything along the Route 6 corridor, for example, is state related. Also, Fairhaven, and it's a real testament to the town and the Board of Public Works and the Superintendent of Public Works, Vinnie Furtado, that they were able to secure a state revolving fund allotment for their upgrades to their wastewater treatment facility. It's a wastewater treatment facility that has $70 million in upgrades, a lot of it focused on nitrogen processing. So that's a zero interest loan that the state has provided to the town. The town of Mattapoisett owns, I think, 16% of that wastewater treatment facility. That will help to fund those needed upgrades. And then there are a lot of local earmarks that we've been able to secure. So it's $25,000 for a new commercial kitchen at the Fairhaven Council on Aging, or it's a new website at the Plum Library in Rochester, or it's safety upgrades to the gymnasium at Old Rochester Regional High School. Those are the things that I love to roll my sleeves up on and work with my local community leaders to try and find funding for projects that really make a difference at the end of the day. So there are large, small, and everything in between.
Yep, that's the little stuff.
Yeah.
We got to leave it at that. This half hour has flown by.
Yeah, it sure has.
Lots more to talk about, but we will see you in a few months. Summertime, we'll see you.
Sounds good to me.
All right. State Representative Mark Sylvia, Fairhaven, our guest. That's going to do it for this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall, the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Did you know that you can watch any of New Bedford Cable Network shows anytime, anywhere on all of your mobile devices? How, you may ask? Just log on to nbcablenetwork.com and bam! You have all 3 channels at your fingertips: public, educational, and government access. Here, you can view our program schedules, watch our channel's live broadcasts, or search for a particular program in our vast library of shows. Last year alone, New Bedford Cable Network produced over 500 shows, and nearly all of them are available online at nbcablenetwork.com. Not only can you stay up to date with what's happening in your local government and schools, but also dive into some of New Bedford Cable Network's original award-winning programs. So check us out at nbcablenetwork.com.